All right, I'm just getting mine up. There we are. Thank you so much for having me, Paige and Tamsin. I'm really glad to be here, and I hope that this will be helpful information. My name is Vicki Jovanovic, and I'm a financial advisor with Sawston Wealth Management. It is a local business. Hold on, I'm moving my PowerPoint thing here. It's a local business that's based in West Olympia. We're a partnership of two advisors, Colleen Gillespie and myself, and it's so much fun to serve all the people in the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of a background for me, because I want you guys to know how you guys could get into financial advising if you ever thought that that would be interesting. Is I didn't actually start out as a financial advisor. This is my second career. So my background is in teaching. My bachelor's degree and then master's degree is in both in education, and I taught internationally and then with the Olympia School District for 10 years before deciding that I needed a change. Teaching is wonderful, and anyone who wants to go into teaching, that is fabulous. We need good teachers. I just knew it was time for me to do something different. So I started working with Colleen here at Sawston Wealth Management while I was getting all of my licensing. The beautiful thing about becoming a financial advisor is that you don't need a specific bachelor's degree. So it might be helpful to have one in math or statistics or things like that, because you do use that in your daily job. But at the same time, so much of the profession is about people. So if you really get the math, that might be wonderful. But if you don't also have confidence talking to people, getting to know people, and using education, teaching, and all of that, then you might have a harder time connecting with all of your clients. So I worked for 10 years as a teacher, and then now I'm in my second year as a financial advisor. If you are interested in becoming a financial advisor, there's a couple things that you need to pay attention to. First of all is, of course, you need a bachelor's degree, but of course that can be in any area. But there's some core skills and competencies that will make this job a lot easier. And that's being able to talk to people, being able to analyze a situation. We get all sorts of information from clients, and we have to analyze it down into its core concepts to be able to create a plan that's individualized for each client. You need to be able to communicate. You're going to talk to all of the people. A lot of our conversations are about uncomfortable topics. We have to talk to people about marriage, divorce, death of a partner. Maybe people saved for retirement really well, and we have some really happy conversations. Maybe some people didn't save for retirement, and we have to have some really hard conversations. So being able to hold space for our clients that's a really safe space is important, and being able to have clear communication. Obviously, you need to have math skills, because that's a big part of what you do. And then also sales. I don't like to think about it being salesy, because I'm not selling anybody anything, but at the same time, people choose an advisor because they trust you. So you do have to kind of sell yourself in a way of why would you be a good choice over all of the other wonderful advisors in the area. And then time management, says stress management skills, but really that's time management skills. Can you get things done in a way that is not stressful because you're staying on top of things? There's no one standing behind you being like, hey, have you gotten those reports done? You just have to get it done. So those are some things to keep in mind if you're thinking about wanting to be a financial advisor. There are two required licenses. Well, one is required and one is really helpful. You want it. To get started with financial advising, you have to pass the Series 65. It's given by FINRA, and it's all about laws, regulations, and ethics. And so legally, you're not allowed to do any sort of advising, before you take this test. So anytime you see any of those videos on TikTok or Instagram that are offering financial advice, I mean, you don't have to ask them, but those people technically should be licensed before giving out any advice in order to stay legal. And then the other one is the Certified Financial Planner, which is a really helpful designation. It's not required, but it shows you all of the clients and anyone in the community that you know what you're talking about. And this one is not just a test. It has a test, but you also have to have 6,000 hours of experience to qualify to use the designation. Okay, so that's just a little bit about who I am, the process that I've gone through to become a financial advisor. So now we'll just get into who you guys are. So personal finance is just that. It's personal. So anybody who tells you this is exactly what you should do, these are all the boxes that you need to check, probably isn't doing it right, because every person has completely different situations that they have to work around. So you have to know who you are in order to plan the right package of finance to make sense for your life, right? There we go. So there's different things that you need to know about yourself. So the first one is your knowledge. What do you know about your finances currently? If you're going to look through your finances, would you be able to answer the question of, what is my credit score? Could you answer, what is my net worth? What is my total take-home pay for the month? What am I spending money on? Things like that, where you're like, oh yeah, I know most of those things, but we might not know all of them. So having knowledge about our like cold hard numbers is a really helpful place to know where we're starting from. But then the other part of who you are financially is, what do you feel about your finances? So there are huge areas of study right now into behavioral finance and also financial therapy, because our emotions play a massive part in our decisions. I mean, that makes sense, right? Our emotions play a part in all of our decisions, but think about your finances. Take yourself back to when you were a child, not even what you're thinking about right now. Did you come from a family that experienced poverty? Did you come from a family that had maybe a lot of medical bills? Did you come from a family that you always knew you were going to have your next meal, and you always had clothes that fit, and you always had a warm place to live? All of these experiences are formative experiences and shape how we view our finances and how we make decisions now. So as adults, all of your experiences are still shaping your worldview, and that can be a good thing. And it can also be something that we have to work through to be able to make the best decisions for ourselves. So going to a financial therapist or just your regular therapist and talk about, these are some things that we went through, and this was a stress. I had a scarcity mindset when I was growing up, and it's you to work past that. That's a really important part of your financial journey. One thing that you can do, and I've actually given Paige all of the bunch of different resources that you guys can work on afterwards, is take a financial satisfaction survey. So this is kind of before you start anything, before you think about budgeting, investing, all of that, is to figure out, where am I, both numbers wise, creating a financial statement of what's in my bank account, what's coming in, what's going out, and then a financial satisfaction survey. Am I happy with where I am? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel like I can go out to eat and be okay? Am I stressed about paying rent next month? And it'll help you pinpoint and identify areas that maybe you need to work on, maybe areas that you're putting too much towards. And this will come into play a little bit more later when we talk about creating a healthy budget for yourself. So we're going to borrow Maslow's hierarchy and apply it to finances. So Maslow created this wonderful hierarchy of our human needs, and we don't get to the top, which is all the good stuff, until we have all of the bottom and the base layers nice and solid. So our first layer of finance is security. Do you have food? Do you have rent? Do you have insurance? Do you have an emergency fund? These are all the things that we need to make sure that we take care of before we think about, okay, what are we going to do for retirement and traveling or all these things? Obviously, if you're worried about feeding your children, you're also not going to be planning your retirement early life, right? So we have to make sure that we have our base layer set. Then once we've got our base layer set, we can think about, all right, let's retire. Let's think about paying off a mortgage or purchasing a house in the first place. What about higher education? What is our philosophy about that for our kids? Do we want to help fund that? Do we want to let them do that on their own? Do we want to have kids? Do I want to get married? Who knows? This is a place where you can kind of make those decisions from a place of safety because you know you can eat and you have a really great place to live. Next is, what about all those extra things? And a lot of us live in level 2 for our whole lives, and that's a great place to be. The next one is, all right, I feel like I can retire eventually. I feel like I've gotten most of my important things. What other stuff can I now add into my goals? Do I want to go out on my own and open my own business? You guys are all entrepreneurs. What other like big travel things, just goals that you want to add on top of an already solid foundation. And then the last one is going to be financial freedom. Those people, they're FIRE people, financial independence, retire early. They're like, I'm 35 and I retired. Like, good for you. That's not super practical for a lot of people, but it can be a goal, and that's amazing. So we all start at the very bottom. We all want to travel higher up into that hierarchy, but how do we get there? So this first one, I have like 6 steps that we're going to follow. The first step is going to be like, why did you say this? This is stupidly basic, but it is what it is. And it's spend less than you make. Like, I know that's terrible. Why are we talking about this? Spend less than you make. Well, there's actually 2 parts to that statement that we can dig into, and it's spend less than you make. So you can spend less, or you can make more, or you can do both at the same time to create more margin. If you're spending more than you make, then you don't have any money to invest in the stock market or pay off student loans or anything because you have no margin. You're in negative, right? So one of the ways that you can do that is to track your finances. So I gave Paige a couple of different finance tracking things. One's in an Excel spreadsheet, one is a PDF. So you are free to use those as much or as little as you like, totally fine. Some people enjoy the envelope method, where at the beginning of the month, you decide how much money you want to spend on a certain category and put that amount of cash in the envelope, spend it freely, and when it's done, it's done. It's gone for that month. Now, that doesn't work well for, say, groceries because you still have to eat, even if you run out. But that might be a great method for spending money or miscellaneous things that, okay, well, this is my coffee money for the month. Oh, I went through it a little bit faster. That way you don't go over that budgeted amount. So let's talk about creating your budget. Now, budgets kind of have a bad rap where you think about like, oh, this is going to hurt. You don't want me to spend any money. We have to cut out all the fun things. And that's not true. It is true that there are some things that you may have to cut out depending on what your financial situation looks like, but budgets aren't all bad. The point of a budget is to dream first and find the things that are really important to you. What are your long-term goals? What are your short-term goals? What do you have for your career, for your education, for yourself, for anybody that might depend on you? First, big picture, make sure that you're including all the things that you want to have in your life. Then once you've thought about that big picture idea, you're going to think about your spending. What patterns do you see? Do you see any of those big emotions from some of your past experiences coming up when you're spending? Do you find that you're spending more when certain outside things are happening? Do you find that there are patterns around maybe the day? Like if you have an extra busy day, you're going to spend more. All of these things are patterns to notice. Are you eating out a lot because you're tired at the end of the day? That's not a bad thing. None of these things are bad. We want to just note them down so that way you see where your money is going. And then we can take a look at those big goals. Is what you're spending, is that pointing to you towards those goals that you're looking for? If it is, great, keep going. If it's not, that's when you can make a decision. You're like, should I keep this in? Should I cut this out? So after you've tracked your spending, then you're going to start making a plan. So do you have money left after you've paid all of your bills each month? If you do, can you save 5%? Can you save 20%? That's a lot. That don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to save 20%. But just little bits here and there. What can we use to create more wealth for you? So what discretionary, that means like what fun spending, are you wanting to include in your budget? Because you should include fun money in your budget. Nobody, like if you go on a diet, no one ever sticks to that because it's awful. You don't get any fun food. Same thing with a budget. If you just have a bare bones budget, that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that. So make sure you include your discretionary, your fun money in your budget. And then you're creating a plan that aligns to the things that are actually important to you, rather than just the things that either are important to other people or you're just spending it without thinking. And then the last way, the last part of your budget is automation. So a lot of times, if you can automate things, it's out of sight, out of mind, excellent. So things like moving money into your savings, contributing to your retirement account. If you have a non-savings investment account that you've created a plan for, make sure those are automated at the beginning of the month or right after your pay period. That way, everything that's left is free to spend in the current month. Okay, so we talked about spending money, but here making money is a huge part of your budget and how much money you have to invest. Active income is where it's tied to your time and tied to your job. So there's only so many hours in the day, and honestly, nobody wants to spend all of those hours working. We want to have time off. We want to be able to spend time with our family. We want to be able to do our hobbies. So yeah, just saying, hey, you can increase your take-home pay by working more hours is a legitimate way to increase your net worth. Definitely. You could get a part-time job. There's no shame in doing that. But at the same time, passive income is income that is not connected directly to your time, can really help. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that people do passive income. I am not great at some of these. I mean, if you are wonderful with designing online courses or art, you can sell them on Etsy. There's all sorts of passive income streams out there. But the one that we're going to talk about later is investing. And that's the one that I know I can do and everyone can do. Okay, the next step after you spend less than you make is to pay off high interest debt. And this can be done concurrently with our next step. High interest debt is anything that is over 7 to 8% interest, and this 100% includes all credit cards. Credit cards are amazing financial tools that can really, really help you, but they are also a massive pit that can pull you down if you're not using them properly. So maintaining a balance on a credit card is not a great financial plan. So always, always, always try to pay off your credit card balance every month. And if you need to make a plan to help chip away at credit card, if you have any credit card debt, talk to somebody. There's no shame in having credit card debt, and we want to help you get rid of it because that's often your highest interest debt, 27%. So we want to help you get rid of that. So after you're working on your high interest debt, and kind of concurrent with that is you're creating your emergency fund. So this is still all building your really solid foundation so that when you start doing things that are a little bit more risky, you're going to be okay. So we recommend that you have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So how much money do you need for 1 month? And now we would always say non-discretionary expenses. So the things that you can't cut out. Obviously, if you were laid off from your job, you would probably not go out to coffee as much. You might cut some of your streaming services. So some of those kinds of things. It's kind of like, a worst case scenario. What would you have to pay? And that would be your non-discretionary expenses. So we would say, what about 3 to 6 months of those? Can you get that and have that in your bank account, or even better, in a high yield savings account, so that it's earning you a bit of money, so that if anything were ever to go wrong, you would have a cushion and you wouldn't have to borrow money to be able to cover your car breaking down or getting laid off or an unexpected medical bill. So we want to make sure that you're coming from a place of safety. Once you have that, then you are ready to invest. And that's what we're going to spend the rest of the lecture series talking about, or today talking about, is investing. And that's how you then reach your goals. Okay, going back to this slide here is this active versus passive income. Active income, as we know, is great because it's what we use our time in our job, but the bulk of the money that we can make in our life is tied to our passive income and our investing. So let's talk about how that works. Would you use your money to buy a thing that's just going to be that thing? Or if you had a choice, would you use your money to buy a thing that's going to produce more of whatever that thing is? Well, you'd think that the second one would be a better choice. Like, okay, I want to have a bouquet of flowers. Well, I could go and buy a bouquet of flowers, or I could go buy a bunch of seeds, plant them, cultivate them, watch them grow, and then harvest my own bouquet of flowers that I grew myself. And then I could also harvest the seeds from my flowers and plant them and then do it again. So there's a difference. One is instant gratification. I went out and I bought my flowers, and that's really fun. I love having beautiful flowers on my table. The other one took a lot longer. There was more effort involved, but now I'm going to have flowers forever because I can keep cultivating them. It's the same thing with investments. You can go out and use your money to buy whatever you'd like, but you could also choose to go out and use your money that will make you more money. And this is done through the beauty of compound interest. Okay, so let's look at this graph real fast. What this graph is showing is a person who invested $1,000 a year. That breaks down to $83 a month. If they just put $1,000 a year for 45 years in an account, they would have $45. If they invested it at 5%, which is the average market return, so that's not an aggressive portfolio or really conservative, that's just middle of the road, then you would have $160 $115,000 in the same period of time. So that's $115,000 that you didn't work for because your money did it for you. Now that's at 5%. If we rose that up to 7% or 8%, right? Sorry, I did the math for 8%, you would have $385,000. Still, for that same $45,000 investment, that's a $340,000 difference. Now that's the beauty of compound interest. What happens in compound interest, regular interest, is you take $100 and you say, okay, this is going to increase at 5%. And you would increase 5%, which is adding $5 on. And then you would increase another 5%, which would add another $5 on. And so it would grow incrementally by $5 each time that interest is compounded or interest is added. But compound interest is different. It adds whatever interest was added on before to the main portion, so that when you add 5% the next time, you're not adding 5% of 100, you'd be adding 5% of 105. So at the beginning, there's not a lot of difference, but as you can see from the graph, things start to compound exponentially and then continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. So as long as you have timeline, this is another thing we'll talk about, timeline, compound interest is going to be the one to do all of the work for you. Currently, one of a retirement account that you can open, it's called a Roth IRA. And the 2024 limit for a contribution is $7,000. If you were to put in that $7,000 and over the same timeline that's on this graph, and you maxed out, put $7,000 every year at 5%, which again is just a medium, not too risky, not too safe portfolio, the account would be worth $1,037,000, which to my mind is like, that's crazy. I could never imagine having that much money doing all the normal jobs that I do. But investing $7,000 a year, that is a goal that we can reach towards. Okay, so if you want to start investing, this is how we do it. There's 4 steps. It's really easy, but we often miss step 3 and 4. Step 1 is to open an account. There's lots of different accounts you can open. You have lots of choices. Step 2 is to contribute the money. But then step 3 is you have to buy stuff with the money. So if you contributed some money to your 401k at work, that's awesome. Or maybe you have an IRA or an individual account or a 529. Those are all containers and they're excellent containers and we put our money in them. But if you just contributed, then it's sitting there in cash and it's not doing anything. You have to go out and buy assets that are then going to be stored in those containers. And then the last one is to monitor them. I am a huge proponent of buy and hold. There's not a lot of need for any sort of day trading or monitoring all the time, but you want to make sure that the companies or mutual funds, or we'll talk about all different things that you can buy, are healthy. So that way they're going to keep working for you the way that you want them to work for you. So there are so many accounts that you can choose from. How do you know which of them is the right one? Well, here comes again, personal finance. Everything is personal. There's not one that's a great choice for everybody. And there's not one that's like, oh, this is terrible, no one should use this. It all depends on what your goals are and what your timeline is. So if you have short-term goals, that affects which account you should use. If you have long-term goals, that also affects which type of account you should use. So here's some examples. If you need one for retirement, a type of account you could open is an IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, 403b. I'm sure you've heard of these terms before. These are all titles of types of accounts. The numbers 401k and 403b, those are weird names, and they get these types of accounts get their names from the section of the IRC code with the IRS where the laws for those plans come from. So that's why Plan 403B is in Section 403B of the IRC. I don't know why they ever didn't come up with a different name, but that's just what it is. If you're planning for education for either yourself or your child, you might use a 529 plan or a Coverdell plan. Or if your goals are more general, a taxable individual brokerage account is the best way to go, or that JTWROS, that is a joint tenants with rights of survivorship. It just means a joint account for you and a person who you would like to have a joint account with. Now, the more specific your goals, the better tax treatment you're going to have. Both the retirement and the education options have specific goals, meaning you're limited to what you can use the money for. Retirement accounts, you can't take the money out until after you're 59 and a half. You have to wait because they want you to use it for your retirement. But because of that, you get tax savings, either now when you're putting the money in or later when you're taking the money out, depending on which account you choose. Education, same thing. It's a wonderful plan, but if you use the money for something that's not education, guess what? You get taxed on it and you get a fee. So as long as you are using those for the specific goals, then they're great. The general is wonderful because you can use it for anything. There's no timeline that's tied to it. But then because it's general, there's not necessarily the tax benefits like the specific accounts have. So for businesses, because you guys are all entrepreneurs, a really great way to save yourself on your business income tax is by opening one of these 3 retirement plans. So a simple IRA is great for small businesses. They're the simplest, get it simple, right? They're the easiest ones to open, both for the employers and the employees. And you, as the employer, can give up to a 3% match. And the max is $16,000 for the year. Catch-ups, the 2 of them have catch-ups. A catch-up is just anyone that's over 50 can contribute extra to their retirement account. So 401k can be better than a simple IRA because the max is much higher. You can give $23,000 a year, which that's a lot more money, but they have a lot more regulations surrounding them. They're more expensive to run. So businesses are, especially small businesses, are less likely to choose the 401k, especially as they're getting started. If you're a solo business and you don't have any other employees, a really great one is the SEP IRA, because you can contribute up to $69,000. Now that's before tax. That would lower your taxable income by $69,000. That's a lot. And then that goes into a retirement plan for yourself. The reason it's not great for if you have other employees is you have to treat every employee the same. So if you were to put that into your retirement account, you would also have to put that into all of your employees' retirement accounts. So if you would like to hire me and put $69,000 into my retirement account, that would be great. You're welcome to do that. But at the same time, maybe don't do that. Okay, why does the timeline matter? So I put a graph here. I grabbed this from Morningstar, which is one of the pieces of software that we use to monitor all of our portfolios and things like that. This is showing just one day of the S&P 500. It's actually SPX, which is index fund that follows the S&P 500. And if you can see it, it's up and down, and that's only in one day. So we have a lot of volatility. If we compare, this is 1 year. Still a lot of volatility, but you can kind of see a trend of it starts lower and it goes higher. Now, if we were to sell, if you can look there on the screen, if we were to sell in November, well, that's pretty low. I don't want to sell in November. I want to sell in January. But unfortunately, we can't see the future, so we don't know what's going to happen, right? So when we have a long period of time, it's okay for us to take more risk in the things that we choose to invest in. And when we have a shorter period of time, we need to make sure that we're taking less risk because we don't want to accidentally have to sell all of our investments at a time when the market's really, really low. Let's back out again just one more time so you can see the big picture. This is since the S&P 500 has been monitored since 1950. So you can see some of that compound interest happening again, where things aren't really moving. And then all of a sudden we shoot way up. So you might say, we missed it. If only I was alive in 1950 to buy 2,000 shares of SPX, I would be a millionaire. True, true. But there's nothing to be had by saying, what if? We don't move forward by looking back and being like, I wish I had done this 10 years ago, or I wish I had set up an account for myself or my child so many years ago. That doesn't help anybody, but it's a great example of sticking the course. All of those big dips were big financial losses at the time. But if you look at it as a whole, it's always going up. And we always say that the market 70% of the time is going up, 30% of the time is going down. And as long as your goal is a long way away, then you have the ability to ride all of those waves and to take advantage of the growth. If your goal is a short way away, like maybe you want to buy a house in 3 to 5 years, well, then you would need to choose things that you're going to purchase in your account that would be a lot less risky. And we probably at Sawston wouldn't recommend that you go into the stock market at all. So let's look at things that you can buy in your account. Now, this is just 4 things. There are a ton of things that you can buy. So the most common that people think of when you think of investing are stocks. And this is actually when you buy a stock, you're buying a piece of ownership of a company. So if you own a Microsoft stock, you own Microsoft. You don't own all of it, but you own a little bit of Microsoft. Same thing with any other company that you can think of that's publicly traded. It's a piece of ownership. A bond, however, is not ownership, it's a loan. So you don't actually own any of that company. They're just trying to raise money to be able to do the things that they want to do with their company. And they're like, hey, if you lend us this amount of money, we'll repay you with interest in X number of years. And so people are like, yeah, that sounds great. So it's less risky, but you also get less in return. And you can also have government bonds, which is the exact same thing, just loans to the government. Mutual funds. Now, for anybody who's wanting to invest on their own, mutual funds and index funds and ETFs are the way to go. All of those things that I just said, they're pooled sets of investments. So you could go out by yourself and buy yourself some Microsoft. You could buy Boeing, which is not doing so great right now. You can go out and buy pieces of stock of whatever company that you'd like. But what happens when a door of an airplane falls off? Oh no, all of a sudden your stock that you chose crashes, and that's terrible. We don't want to have that kind of risk for you. So what a pooled investment does, like a mutual fund, is that fund owns like 1,000 different companies, and you're just buying a piece of that whole pie. That way, you also own 1,000 different companies, just a little bit of it. So if one company has an unfortunate thing that makes their stock drop, you're okay because that's not your entire portfolio. So a mutual fund can be really great. Sometimes they can be more expensive because they're more actively managed. If you want to do it on your own, I would recommend looking for an index fund. And an index fund can be a mutual fund or an ETF, which is the same as a mutual fund, but it's traded like a stock. But an index fund follows a specific index, like the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones. And you're not choosing any sort of specific companies because that can take a lot of time, and who has time to think about all this stuff? But you're just going to buy one. There's even some index funds that follow the entire market. Like it's a total market index fund. Like, great. That sounds perfect. I'll buy that one. The next thing on there is CDs. Those are certificates of deposit. And these are like some of the safest investments. None of them are 100% safe because they're all investments. But it's loans to FDIC insured banks. So, if the bank goes under for any reason while they still have your loan, the government is going to pay you back, which is wonderful. But there's all sorts of things out there. You can buy the even recently released a Bitcoin ETF that if you felt so sure of Bitcoin, you could go out and buy that. We do not deal in Bitcoin, but that does not mean that you can't. So diversifying is the key. You want to have a little bit of everything. And I always think that this is exactly like real life, because real life is better when there's a mix of everybody in your community. If we have our communities and they're all homogenous, that's not great. It's boring. We're not there to support each other when some people are doing great. There's no balance. So just like that, in your portfolios, you want to have diversity, because certain things do better under specific circumstances. And at the same time, this one might not do great in that specific circumstance, but they might be flipped during a different circumstance. And so then they'll balance each other out and give you a smoother investing ride. So in general, these pictures, you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I need to copy these pictures. In general, the more stock market exposure, so the more equities that you have, the more aggressive your portfolio is going to be. So if you look at the sample conservative, we have 40% is bonds and 30% capital preservation. It's like cash and cash equivalents. You have 70% of that entire portfolio is out of the stock market, versus the aggressive, only 10% of that portfolio is out of the stock market. 90% of that is in the stock market buying equities. So finding that balance of how much risk are you willing to take and what amount of time do you have to make the risk worth it? This is called an asset quilt. And this is all the different types of groups of assets. And the fun thing to ask is, looking at the quilt where it's all the different colored squares, each color indicates a different asset type. Looking at them, there's not really a pattern. Each layer is a different year, and it's their yield each year. So there's not like, oh my gosh, US small stocks is always the best. US bonds are always the best. There's no pattern. So it tells you that there's not one that you're going to pick that's always going to be a good one. So you need to be diversified. You want to own everything so that you get all of the good that's happening, and it keeps you safe. You can do it. I'm always here. My favorite part of my job is helping people do it for themselves. So if you have questions, we kind of just threw a ton of information at you. If you have questions about how to do it yourself, I would love to help get you set up with, there's a bunch of free apps that you can use to start investing. If you want more help than that, like you want me to walk beside you and help you pick assets, help you open an account, I can do that as well. But I don't want you to feel intimidated and think that it's something that you can't do. And this is something that you can do for yourself. personally, but also all of your business assets. You can keep your business assets not just in a regular bank account. You could do rolling CDs and things like that. So that way your business assets, while they're sitting there, are still earning money for you and to support your business. Thank you so much.